Hey, and welcome to the Wine After Work podcast, bringing you the perfect balance between unwinding from a hectic day and exploring the captivating world of careers and entrepreneurship. Hosted by Bryce Batts, co-CEO of Career Collective, a 7-figure AEC recruiting and coaching firm, here to share exciting stories, expert tips, and intriguing conversations with industry professionals. So grab your favorite glass, kick back, and join us on this delightful journey. We're glad you're here. Cheers.
Dr. Ann Welsh is a clinical psychologist, executive coach, and consultant. Dr. Welsh began her career at Harvard before opening her own practice with a focus on supporting women in leadership and working parents across career sectors. Her coaching brings together research and real-life experiences to hone leadership skills, improve emotional intelligence, and create work-life integration. Hey, Ann, welcome to the Wine After Work podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So excited to have you on. Tell us about your journey from Harvard, which, wow, super impressive. Talk about imposter syndrome over here, talking to a Harvard grad. And then to becoming a clinical psychologist and then moving into coaching and consulting. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah. Well, and so you didn't go to Harvard. I worked at Harvard, but
okay.
I went to, I took a couple pivots on the way there. I had been like gung-ho medical school, wanted to be a doctor, got in. And when I got in, it was kind of this meh reaction. I'm almost right. I should be way more excited about this than I am. And something in me said, this is not what you want. Right? Like, this is not where you need to be. So I kind of took a pivot. I went to grad school in psychology. I became the wrong kind of doctor. If you ask my parents, not really, they forgave me for that. And Harvard was kind of the dream job. I had wanted to do student mental health work, and I did, and I loved it. The students were so bright and engaging, and I really did love that work. But as I had been growing that career and doing that work, I was also growing my family simultaneously. And I just, I have 4 kids now, and I got to the point where I said, I can't show up the way I want to show up in both realms. I need to pivot and do something different. And so that's when I started my own practice. And I've been doing private practice now for 13, 14 years.
Wow.
And have really enjoyed that. And then, probably 5-6 years ago, I started also moving into executive coaching and consulting. And that was because I wanted to be able to serve even more people. I was finding that a lot of my clients in my therapy practice were, high achieving women. And often some of the struggles were with their workplace. And I thought, well, if I could get into executive coaching and work with leadership, maybe there's also ways to promote healthier leadership, healthier workplaces, right? And kind of address this issue in a different way. And coaching allowed me to serve people who weren't in my state as well. So I could kind of serve anyone in, throughout the country or the world, really. And so now I'm doing a mixture of both and really enjoy both. It's slightly different ways of working, but really in the end, across the board, I'm helping women in particular and often working parents in kind of finding their own voice and a way to lead that feels good for them, and a way to mother in a way that feels good to them, and to kind of develop some more an internal compass and internal confidence.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So what are some of those unique challenges that you see women in leadership or even working parents facing? I mean, we always hear about work-life balance, and we know sometimes they're crazier than others. But what are those unique challenges that you see when you're talking to women?
Yeah, across the board, I would say there are kind of 5 themes that come up. And again, this is true, I think, almost of whether I'm talking to people in therapy or in coaching. One is just feeling super overwhelmed, right? Feeling like there is more on my to-do list than I can ever do, and I don't know what to do about that. And kind of relatedly, this feeling of I'm failing at work, I'm failing at mothering, I'm failing at being a good partner, I'm failing at being a good friend, right? This that I can't do all of these things to the degree that I'm supposed to do them. And I constantly feel guilty and bad about it.
Yeah.
And then the other couple things are feeling alone and unsupported, right? I think a lot of people are struggling with, how do I find my village? How do I find connection? How do I find other people that are going through this? I feel like I'm the only one. And then also feeling unhappy. So this is not what I thought it would be. This isn't, I miss maybe my pre-kid life, or I miss my life before this job, or maybe I don't actually like leadership as much as I wanted this, COO role, but it's making me miserable. And what do I do now? And so kind of, how do I deal with some unhappiness that comes up, even maybe when I got the thing that I thought I wanted?
Yeah. I think it's huge to be able to admit that too. Like, I miss my pre-kid life. You got to be amongst friends or feel like you're in a safe space to even say things like that, without fear of judgment. I know I had a coach about a year or two ago, and I kept saying, I feel like I should do this, I should do that. She's like, stop shoulding all over yourself. I'm like, and I think that's what a lot of women go through. You feel like you should do all these things, but what do you want to do?
Right. And I think the expectations on us as women, as mothers, are just insanely high, right? And essentially you're playing this rigged game. You can't actually meet them. That's the truth in the end, right?
Yeah, it's impossible.
You cannot be, the Pinterest mom and whatever, the, boss babe and, the CEO. Like, you can't do all of those things the way that the internet, at least, would have you believe you're supposed to do them. And it's not just social media, right? It's also voices that we've had in our heads. It's from our family, right? It's the whole socialization of being a girl is to be a good girl, to be a people pleaser, to make everybody else happy, and to kind of stuff your own voice down inside along the way. And I think that's exactly where some of this difficulty comes up, is that, like, we've stopped asking ourselves what we want. We're just doing what everyone else says we're supposed to do.
Yeah. And then it's hard to find your own voice again and figure out what you really want, because you've been thinking about everybody else for so long.
Yeah. It totally. I joke that sometimes it can feel even hard for people to ask, like, what do I want for dinner? Because like, we just don't have any practice, right? What do you want to do this weekend? I don't know. I'm doing whatever kids' soccer games because I don't have a choice in what I do. And yet it's like a skill, right? You can grow it, you can practice, you can kind of, right now, maybe that want is a whisper and there's a lot of yelling. So it feels impossible to hear it, but you can kind of start to turn down the volume on the yelling of what you're supposed to do, and kind of start to touch base with that whisper. Even if it is starting with, what do I actually want to eat for dinner? Not what's in the refrigerator right now.
Yeah. So tell us about your coaching approach. I know you kind of marry research along with real life experiences, so what does that look like for your clients?
Yeah. So, kind of unbeknownst to me in terms of what the future would hold, my research in graduate school, I kind of had two tracks, and one was looking at career development. And I think I was partly drawn to that because I had made a pivot, a pretty big pivot myself already.
Yeah.
And I think it was also, I had a working mom. My mom was a doctor when that was really common, back in 1981 when I was a kid. She was like probably one of the few working mothers in my class, let alone to be a science field.
Yeah.
So I think I was always fascinated by this idea of career and having a big job. And so I did a lot of research around that. The other track that I happened to research, and this was before I became a parent, was the transition to motherhood. What kind of helps people fare well in that transition. I was really interested in that idea of like the identity shift that goes with it. And it was really understudied at the time. So there was a lot of room for me to do research in it. And so I pull from those a lot, right? I've done a ton of just the background reading, but also my own work around, what do interests me? What parts of our identity shift, both in terms of taking jobs and moving through careers, and in terms of that choice to move through parenthood or not, and what helps, even if it's something as small as social support, or kind of cultivating an attitude of playfulness, or self-knowledge and having the chance to be reflective, right? Like I have all of that research knowledge of all the things that we see overall that are useful. And I know from my own experience and from the clinical work I've done for so many years that you have to take all of that and filter it through your own personal lens and figure out what of that's applicable to me in my particular situation. What is my narrative, my history that informs how all of this is playing out? Because none of the big picture factors that we see in the research are kind of operating in a vacuum, right? We cannot control all of these other variables of the family you were born into and your temperament and the particular job that you have and that work environment and all of these other factors.
Yeah. And it's hard to say what kind of parent you're going to be until you are a parent. You just have no idea.
And it's so kid dependent too, right? Like, I mean, I have 4 kids and I can tell you that one of the gifts of 4 kids is just that I started to recognize I'm not a total screw up as a parent, right? That like I am parenting somewhat consistently across these kids and they have very different temperaments and struggle with different things because they just showed up that way. And I am that wasn't, that's biology, that's genetics. That's not necessarily on me.
Right. Yeah, that takes some of the pressure off.
Totally.
You were born this way, I swear. Well, I joke with my kids now. I'm like, you can talk about that in therapy one day.
Yeah. That is one of the maybe the downsides of my career is I think, well, they're all, going to need lots of therapy because I'm messing them up in all sorts of ways. But I will say, one of the beauties I see of the younger generations is that therapy's become so normalized. Like every therapist, everyone has a coach. All of my Gen Z clients, some of them will just come in and say, I just thought I was supposed to have a therapist because everybody else does. I don't know that I actually have anything to talk about. And we always do find stuff to talk about. And always, I think they find it helpful. Otherwise they wouldn't keep coming. But it's this idea that like, why wouldn't you have support? And I think, I hope that more moms catch on to that, right? Those of us that are not Gen Zers, just coming out of and maybe there is some more stigma around getting support, start to access like, it's okay, right? Motherhood, work, these are things we care a lot about. And professional athletes have a coach. So why wouldn't we get one for ourselves as far as our career or our parenting goes?
Yeah, it's so true. And that's a great way to look at Gen Z because you always hear the negative side of different generations. But it's true. I think it's so great that people are embracing therapy more. I was talking to a friend last night and I'm like, looking back, my parents divorced when I was a sophomore in college. I was like, I needed therapy so badly. And I should have gone to talk about all of the things and the emotions I was having. But, I didn't. It was like late 90s and just didn't, I don't know. I didn't even consider it as an option too thoroughly.
Yeah.
Well, we hear about emotional intelligence a lot now. And so tell us how you think that plays into leadership and how somebody can improve their emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing, it can feel like a buzzword, but it really comes down to being a combination of being empathic, but also being self-reflective, right? I think that's a huge part of emotional intelligence is understanding yourself, your, triggers, for lack of a better word, what kinds of things you're going to react to more strongly, what you're personally worried about, and then understanding kind of how other people might be reacting. So there's a little bit of, the term we would use in psychology is psychological mindedness, right? How do I think about things versus how do other people think about things? How can I start to understand that we're all approaching this differently from our own stuff? And I think when I coach people on developing that, it's a lot of self-reflection in the beginning, right? Starting with that self-awareness piece. And then it is things like, empathy skills, listening skills, which I think sometimes people are like, how do you learn to listen? I mean, that's my entire graduate school was learning.
Right.
It's a skill that you have to develop where it's not waiting for my turn to speak. It's actually taking in what someone is saying, being super present, then thinking about your response. It's a slower pace of conversation. And then we also work on kind of emotional regulation skills and emotional boundary settings, right? So that you're not personally reacting to everything else that's going on in your workplace. You're allowing people's stuff to sit with them and to only take on what is your stuff, and kind of not so much responsibility for everyone else's feelings.
Yeah, that's good. We opened our business 2 years ago, and I had never really managed a team before. And so I felt like in the beginning, because I was always just an individual contributor, and I felt like in the beginning I was taking on everybody's stuff, and I was like, oh, dealing with all the people stuff is the worst. Like, why can't everyone just do their job and then, talk to their friends about all their issues?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think as women, we're particularly prone to that because we're socialized to do it, right? I have had so many conversations with women in leadership who are exhausted and burnt out because they are doing the emotional labor for the rest of the team, right? They're the ones that are holding, Joe's stressed out because his kid is sick and Mary's, got this other thing going on. And, Sam is just always super reactive whenever it's crunch time. And I know all of these pieces. I kind of regulate them so that I can do the work. And it's all invisible. They don't even necessarily know.
That's too much.
Now, like, hey, look at all this stuff you're doing. This is unpaid labor you're doing on behalf of the whole team. And can we put some of this stuff back on them to do?
That's really great advice. And then how do you put it back on them?
And that's the boundaries piece, right? I've used the illusion of like when people aren't taking emotional responsibility for themselves, it's kind of like, your kid comes out of school and says, here's my backpack, you carry it, mom. And that everyone is handing their backpacks to this individual that's maybe doing that emotional work. And to say, hand the backpack back to them and say, all right, I know that, you get stressed out when it's crunch time. It's not actually my job to carry this one for you. You need to figure out how to regulate that it's and what's your own process on that. That is not my job. So if you get all worked up, you get all worked up, and I can tolerate that. And that's not on me.
Yeah, that's good. And it's the same at home, I think, with a lot of women carrying that mental load, the invisible load. Because, I will say my husband's fantastic and he does lots of things. And I feel like, we split things 50-50, which I enjoy and require. But at the same time, I feel like for the most part, women are checking the emails. We're keeping a running tally in our head of, where's the shirt that they have to wear to dance on Thursday night? And then, just such silly things, but someone's got to keep all those balls in the air.
Yeah. And it's exhausting. And I think, one of the things I do is fair play work. So Eve Rodsky wrote the book Fair Play, and it's talking about that mental load at home. And you kind of put stuff back towards your partner and find a more equitable division of labor at home. But I think a lot of that stuff applies at work too, right? These aren't separate silos. They're super integrated, our work and our families. And across the board, it is the sense of how can we as women, give people their backpacks back, right? And say, I'm not carry all of this and someone else has to help me. And it takes a lot of personal work, I think, as women, because we have to work against all of the messages saying that we're supposed to.
Yeah, I love that analogy of giving the backpack back. And I think, like you said, in creating boundaries too, because people are working from home. So you're always at your desk, or, available. You've got a cell phone with email and text and phone. So you have to just decide, when am I going to cut it off or put my phone away or close my laptop and just be done for the day? Because I find myself even just checking in. I'm like, well, it's not a big deal. I'm just, just checking my email, responding to a few things.
Totally. It feels like it. Well, I think it's that the death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's like, it isn't a big deal to check your email one more time. But the problem is that it's not just that. Usually it's doing that 300 times. And then that has a cost over time.
Yeah. And do you find once people do disconnect, say they go on a vacation or something like that, it feels like it takes a couple of days to finally relax and enjoy yourself, because you're like, oh, what am I missing? I need to be checking on these things or doing this. At least personally, I feel that way.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's really common. I a client wants to talk about, she's like, I need a vacation first to be able to take my vacation. So that
Yes,
I can get
I
into
get
like
that.
really disconnected. Um, but I think just recognizing that that's pretty normal. That a lot of us struggle with that, putting things down and kind of moving into vacation mode. Um, and that there's going to be some reentry struggles on the other side if you take a nice long disconnected break. And again, that's also okay. And it's still totally worth taking that vacation and taking
Yes.
that is restorative, right? I think one of the
Yeah.
things with all of my clients about is the value of rest. And I mean, sleep, yes, sleep's super important, but of just rest and allowing yourself that rest. We in school get so used to someone saying when it's, whether it's nap time as girls,
Yeah.
you push yourself through the semester as a college student and you kind of, go into finals, you pull all nighters, and then you have that nice long break where there's no responsibility for a couple weeks. We don't get that as adults. We have to take rest, and it's going to have to come when things are busy, right? You're going to have to take that rest, even though there's stuff that you're supposed to be doing, because there's never going to be a time where you
Exactly.
needed all of the stuff.
Yep.
Allow that rest.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, I'm sure you've got, I don't know, thousands of success stories, but can you tell us about, a client transformation or a client you were really happy to see kind of transform with your coaching and consulting?
Yeah, I think I can give one example of a client who, she came to me and was, she worked at a really large, we'll just say really large organization. We'll leave it at that. And she was just careening towards burnout, and it wasn't just her in that case. There were a lot of external factors. This company had laid a bunch of people off, so she was now doing 3 jobs simultaneously. And the initial solution was like, okay, this is a pretty toxic environment, I want to get out. And she did. And then it happened again. And again, similar external factors. There were some layoffs. She's now doing the work of too many people. But that was the point where she was able to say, maybe I'm also contributing to this dynamic in a way, right? Like maybe it wasn't, yes, there were these external things, 100%, but are there ways in which I'm kind of feeding into that? So then
Right.
some of that deeper work of, what are you bringing to the table here? Like, where could you be better at setting boundaries? Where could you tolerate disappointing people? Where is it okay to be 80%, right? And how we did that was then also looking at her values and, recognizing when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And essentially she was always saying yes to work and always saying no to herself, her kids, everything else. And that was not sustainable, right? And so then she allowed herself she did actually switch jobs a third time, but I think in the third position, it was kind of this sense of now I can move into this space of being more stable and grounded going into it, and let work have some limits around it that feel aligned with how I want to be showing up in the world. And she's still there at this company and kind of doing much better.
Oh, that's amazing. Yep, that's a good success story for sure. Well, a lot of our listeners are aspiring leaders or professionals. What advice would you give them to help them kind of excel through their leadership journey?
I think 2 things. I think, one is if they're also parents or wanting to grow their family, is to recognize that, like, maybe you can have it all, but it has to be in a way that fits you. And having it all is still going to involve some degree of guilt and stress, right? Like that is going to be part of your working parent journey. And those things don't mean you're doing it wrong. It's hard because it's hard. You're not doing it wrong. It is hard, full stop. And for all women, whether they're wanting to be, parent or not, is that there's no one right way to lead. There was an article that came out really recently, and it was a list of all of the things that women have been discriminated, like all of the behaviors that women were cited for doing things wrong at work, or that they received complaints about or whatever. And it was about 35 things. And that some of them were even exact opposites, right? And we know this as women. Speak up. Don't speak up because you're being too
Oh, yeah.
aggressive, right? that kind of stuff. And in the end, the article boiled down to they're all just being discriminated against because they're women, right? It's not that you haven't found the magic hack to get your way into leadership and you're just missing one tool. It's that you're kind of working uphill a little bit, and you have to find leadership that aligns to you, because then you can stand in that integrity and lead from a place that feels good. Yeah. And may not be at your current position. That may mean moving. That's okay. But you've got to be this kind of unique space that fits your life, your temperament, your personality, your interest. All of those things have to be a part of it.
I think a lot of us grew up, I mean, depending on when you're, what generation you were raised in, but thinking that a leader is somebody who's the loudest in the room, or maybe a boss, in quotes, is someone who's like cutthroat and an a-hole.
Totally.
And I think women, typically lead completely opposite of that. We're more empathetic. We're better listeners. So it's like you're saying, just to position yourself like that, and different than, those stigmas of a leader that we've all heard about.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Awesome.
And I would say within that, to learn to self-advocate, and to kind of name your successes, right? I think that's the one piece, even though I say there's no right way to lead, there is also a way to name your successes, even if it is in a collaborative way. It is the success of your team, but to voice that.
I love that.
You're not going to get what you don't ask for.
Yep. And I heard something recently. They were like, you have to tell your truth at work and in leadership, because if not, then someone else is telling it, and it's probably not your truth.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. Awesome. So Anne, tell us what is on the horizon for you, what's next, upcoming projects, and how we can get in touch with you and all those good things.
Yeah, well, anyone that wants to get in touch with me, my website is www.drannewelsh.com. And that's always a good way to just kind of access any of my services, therapy, coaching. My kind of newest venture is that I've decided to launch a group coaching program for working mothers in particular.
Very exciting.
I think, I'm pumped about it. I found that I love one-on-one work, and I will always do that. But I also think there's a lot of value, in particular for those of us that are mothering, in connecting with other mothers and other people that get it and can say, hey, me too. Hey, this is really hard. Because I think so often we think that we're struggling and we're the only ones. And so it's going to be a small group, like 10 people, hoping to launch in January. People can check out my website. There's a page there, for the group coaching for working mothers that they can look at. And if they're interested, they can reach out. And when I was creating the website, I had someone helping me with the SEO, and she noticed when she was looking at it that in the last 3 months, the search terms of overwhelmed working mother and exhausted working mother have been increased 900%.
Stop.
In the past 3 months.
That's
and
crazy.
Well, no wonder I feel called to do this. There's really, really a need. So if people want to check that out, they can look at my website. I'm also on Instagram. It's at dr.welsh.coaching. And I'm on LinkedIn at Dr. Ann Welsh as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave all of those in the show notes. And I think this type of coaching is so needed. So women who are coming up on the new year and want to start 2024 fresh and with some good support from you and from other people in the group, I think it would be amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Loved having you on today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
And that concludes another engaging episode of the Wine After Work podcast. We hope you enjoyed your discussion today and learned something new. Remember, there's always more to explore when it comes to your career. So until next time, raise your glasses high, and may your evenings be filled with delightful sips and enriching conversations. Cheers, and we'll see you soon on the next episode of Wine After Work.